Okay, so I want to welcome everyone to week 2 of xEssentials. Tonight's a really exciting topic, one I think we'll all learn a lot about. It's setting up your layout in 3D by one of the developers, Gil Jones, who actually implemented this great enhancement in the software. So, Gil, you've got the floor.
All right, so like you said, I'm Gil Jones. I've been developing xLights for, I think it's been at least 4 years now. I know it was somewhere around 2014, beginning of 2015 when I started. I'm going to be going over a lot of stuff about how to get going with 3D. I know a lot of you have probably already done it or played with it. Maybe hopefully I'll share a few details of some little tricks that you didn't know, were available. I've got the whole thing in PowerPoint, but I'm going to be jumping back and forth. I'm going to try to, show you things that I'm talking about in xLights. So I'll be popping back and forth between PowerPoint and xLights. So the topics I have, just going to talk about introducing, 3D a little bit. First, I'm going to go over, what it added, for people who stay in 2D, and then what it takes to switch to 3D and what that means to you as far as what happens to your files and stuff. I'm going to go over how to bring your house into 3D, whether it be a 2D picture or a 3D model. Then it's a pretty big section. The next one is the layout interface, and that's, how the model types are grouped and how they all react and how you place them and select them. And then finally, it'll be going over camera viewpoints and what you can do with those. So the first section, introducing 3D. So why use 3D and why did I develop 3D? Was it because I needed 3D? Not really. I mainly did it for the technical challenge. I'd never done like some of this OpenGL 3D stuff, and it was a lot of had to learn a lot of matrix math, stuff like that, and it took a while. I think I actually found some files where I'd started this at the end of 2017 when I first was working on the idea. But I always wanted to be able to view my layout in 3D. I thought it'd be cool if I could actually like fly through my display while I was watching it playback. And it kind of all started with me really wanting to try to add the pan and zoom feature in there when we were still 2D. So I started working on that, realized, I really need to change the way all these models are positioned to be able to do the pan and zoom. And then I said, while I'm at it, I might as well add the Z-axis. And next thing you know, I did some experimenting and things started working. And so last year I probably spent 200 to 300 hours on getting the 3D stuff working. So do you need to use 3D? Only if you want. xLights will still run just fine with 2D. You're going to be running the same code. So kind of underneath the covers, whether you're 2D or 3D, it's still going to be using 3D positioning. You use 3D if you have a layout that's going to benefit from 3D. Maybe you just think it looks cool to see your preview in 3 dimensions, or we got by without 3D for years, so it's not required. It's really just a nice to have. So what are some of the benefits of using the 3D option? So if you have a house that has lights that face multiple directions, maybe like a corner house, you can represent that without creating multiple views. In the past, I had added a feature where you could create a lot of multiple views, and that was so you could have a side view and a front view. And going 3D was supposed to eliminate that. You were just create a new camera viewpoint and pop to that viewpoint, and then boom, you've got that view, and it's all in one workspace. Now some people have started using the old views as like one view's Christmas, one view's Halloween. That wasn't really what the intention was for that feature, but that's kind of what it's turned into. With 3D, you can model larger layouts in a single view. I don't know if anybody's visited Illumination, Arizona, but it's a huge like drive-through display that's about a mile long, and they used xLights. And I saw how they modeled it in the 2D version. Like, I think it was like 2 years ago, and they had literally like 75 views to try to get all their models that they work with. Well, with this, hopefully they're going to be able to model their entire show all in one workspace, and they might have to jump around, but now they'll just be jumping around to different camera angles. Or maybe you're one of these neighborhoods that likes to have like all the houses on your block or sequence. You could model all of those multiple houses, in your layout with 3D. It allows rendering from multiple angles. Currently, everything still renders as if it was 2 dimensions. It's just now you can change which point of reference you were looking at. So if you had a corner house, you could actually render as if you were standing on the corner instead of straight in front of it. And you could have every effect render from a different angle if you really wanted to get crazy. It kind of made it easier for us to represent some of the 3D models. Like I believe we have the sphere going now, and then Keith added the cube model. And I don't even think I've tried it yet, but I think I saw some check-ins where you can do 3D for the custom models now. And just I thought the 3D just looks a lot nicer. So what happens when you upgrade to 3D? And what I mean is, you've been running a 2018 version and you upgrade to any of the 2019 versions, which technically means you're upgrading to the capability to have the option to use 3D, whether you use it or not. So when you first open your show folder in a 2019 version, the positioning for all your models gets upgraded so that it can support 3D. And that applies even if you're staying with 2D. So it's going to add a Z dimension, but the Z is going to initialize to 0. So everything's still kind of like in a flat plane. And if you stay in 2D, you're never going to see any of that depth, and it'll just look like it did before. So in most cases, you shouldn't notice anything different. You should just run the new version. Everything looks the same. There are a couple exceptions, and part of it is, like, I think that even in my case, I had a case where maybe a candy cane flipped upside down, or if you had, some people drew arches vertically and they flipped the wrong way. And some of those changes were because I found a couple bugs in our models that I had to fix when I was doing the upgrade. And it was really just the right thing to do to fix the bug instead of trying to make things always look the way it used to. And we said, well, those few cases, we'll just have to have the user do a little tweak to get the flip back the way it needed to be. And as always, back up your show folder somewhere else before you upgrade. If you use our default settings, you should be getting backups of your show automatically. But I kind of like to just save it off somewhere else in a zip file, or just a copy somewhere else. If you ever need to revert back to your 2018 or 2017 copies, you could do that. So working in 2D. So 2D, the main features are pan and zoom. So let me pop open. I should have xLights open here. I don't have anything in this view. Let me just, because I'm still in, just draw something real quick so we can see some. So if you click and hold your mouse wheel, you can now move your view back and forth. You can scroll your mouse wheel to zoom in and out. Let's see it over here. I thought we had a, maybe it's when you click 3D, but I think there's something where you can actually show the green square. Oh, background, this one I'm thinking about. Yeah, if you click that 2D bounding box, that's, I think I cover this later, so I think I'm jumping ahead. So I'm not going to go there yet, but remind me if I don't cover this later. There's also trackpad gestures. I don't really know what they all are because I don't use a trackpad, and Dan added a lot of those features. But I know that you can do stuff on the trackpad that can like do rotations and things for objects. I don't know if he has them working for 2D or just 3D. But the main thing is now with 2D, you can you can really zoom in there if you need to position an object, and you can scroll around and zoom back out. That was something that had been asked for quite a while. Yep, so the next page I was going to cover that. So the background properties that we have in 2D, the width and the height determine the render area for model groups if you use grid as per preview. So whenever you create a group, a lot of times, not a lot of times, but whenever you create a group, there's always an option to, let me just create one so we can see it. Down here, there's a default layout mode. The default's the minimal grid. If you change that to grid as per preview, then xLights is going to use this green area to create a render buffer. If you're over in the sequencer, I don't know if you've played with changing your default style, I mean your render style, but that will also have the capability to switch to a per preview render option. So if your default is per preview over here, or you switch your render style to per preview, then in 2D you're using this area inside the green box. So what we did that for was let someone know if they put models outside that area, they might not render, and you would probably want to go back and then change these width and height numbers, because if you change these numbers, it changes the size of this green box, which is going to be that render area. If you're sticking with 2D, you probably don't need to worry about it. It's just going to default to whatever you had it as before. Another thing Dan added recently was this X0 is center. That's because in 2D, down in the lower left corner was always our 0, 0 position. When you switch to 3D, it's kind of the middle of the screen. So the problem is if you start laying out everything in the middle of the 3D screen, then you switch to 2D, everything ends up down here in the corner. So Dan had that option that you could check that box, and it's going to throw things back to center, so that you could still switch back and forth between 2D and 3D and still have something that looked better in 2D than it was looking if you were using the 0, 0 as your center in 3D. So let me jump back to the, delete that, jump back here. So switching to 3D. It's really as simple as checking the 3D checkbox in your layout. So I'm going to open up my show that I had in 2017. So let me go to that show folder, because that should still be my show in 2D. So basically, that just did an upgrade to all my models. And here's that little thing I was telling you about. You see down here how my candy canes are upside down. So if you have that problem, you're just going to go here, grab it, straighten it out, and then hit reverse. So now I've got those looking back like they used to. So you might have, that's the only glitch I had in my layout when it upgraded. So this is easier to see what I was talking about, as far as you can grab the middle mouse button and pan. You can zoom into your layout if you need to place something. So switching to 3D, just check the box. So now you see all my models are here in they're in the 3D view, but they're still all on this, Z equals 0 plane. But that's what, my show looks like. Just jump into 3D. So you can always switch back and forth between the 2D or 3D view. let's see, everything's going to be shifted right since the start corner was 0, 0. So I'm gonna talk about how to do the selections later, just real quick. I can just hold down Shift and select everything. Then I could just grab this and, if I really wanted to center it at 0, 0 on my screen, I can do that. Now, if you jump back to 2D, you're down here over in the left corner, like I was saying can happen. So then if you click that button, that fixes that. But I just noticed it seems like it doesn't fix the background image. So, and I haven't really done that part yet. So I might have to talk to Dan about that because I don't think we have a way to shift the background image. Anyways, I have to remember to talk to him about that. Let's see what I have in my tip here. Zoom out, hold down Shift. Oh, that was just how to do the selection and move everything. Okay. So what is that green grid that you see when you first get into 3D? So we draw a green grid at the bottom by default. It's really just kind of showing you where your y equals 0 ground plane is to help you position things. Most models are going to start out there. You can you could disable it if you want. So you could right click its name over in the list and delete it. There's several parameters you can change. Let me just get back over there. So we've got to switch to the 3D objects, select grid lines. Now that's selected, and you can see the parameters. So you can change the line spacing. Like I can say it's like 25 units between each line. You can change how wide it is. So if I just said that was only 1,000, it would shrink. Go back to 2,000 it started out with. You can come in here and change it to, different colors. And you can add the axes. Let me change this back to something greener. So you can see the blue z-axis and the red x-axis. I don't normally leave those on, but it is an option. That just kind of shows you where your 0 point is in your space. You can add more of these if you want. I kind of showed that over in the presentation here. I just added a few more and changed their sizes and angles. There's really no reason to do that. I'm just kind of showing you that you can have as many as you want of these objects, and they can be at any angle, any color, any grid size. The other thing that we allow is, maybe you want to get that out of the way, but you don't really want to delete the object. You can just make it inactive. And that's true for any of the 3D objects. So what do I have on my next page? So managing 3D objects. So notice we have a 3D objects tab. So all your models that you're used to working with are in the models tab, and then the 3D objects are now organized. I wanted to kind of keep them separate so they weren't mixed together. And the other thing it helped do was we've got it organized where you kind of either work with selecting models or you work with selecting your 3D objects, because there's a few different types of 3D objects. You've got images, you've got grids and mesh, and those are only 3 types we've added so far. But we didn't want you to having these 3D models selecting while you're trying to select your models and vice versa. So if you're wanting to play with your models, you're going to want to be over on your models tab. And let's see what I have in my. Yeah, so I said select 3D objects to manage your 3D stuff. if you add another item, like say if I'm on the Models tab, but I say I want to add another set of grid lines, it automatically switches me to the 3D Objects tab, and you can see it added another grid line object. You can right-click and delete, get rid of that. I'm going to be going over how to do some of the selections of these objects later. Okay, what's on the next page? Okay, so now I'm going to go over adding your house in. So how do I get my house back? Because you notice we don't draw the house by default anymore, because that was done with that background image. So I kind of wanted to divorce that from from the 3D layout, because in 3D you can add as many images as you want. So I'm saying here you have multiple options on how to show your house. You could just import 2D images, and it can be more than one, or you can import a 3D model of your house. You also have the option to not even display your house. I've seen some users that just placed all their models in 3D space, but they placed them as if they were on the house, and it almost kind of looked like a house because they had all their roof angles and everything, and looked really nice even without a house there. So I'm going to show you how to do the first option, which is bring images in. So let me get out of this and go to my blank area. Hope it doesn't crash. Switching show directory seems to always be the thing that crashes me the most. Okay, so if you want to if you're on the 3D Objects tab, you want to place an image, use Add Object button, click Image. It's automatically put at 0, 0. Then we need to go over and navigate to whatever file we want to use. Grab my picture of my house. So I'm going to place that, pretty much wherever I like it. And I'll be going over using these movement handles later. So with that selected, I can change the brightness since you don't want it so bright. Maybe even down lower than that. And if you need, you can change the transparency so that you could see something behind it. Let's see, what else did I talk about? Yeah, you can add as many as you like. So let me add another one. So I'll add another image. And let's see, do I have, I have my top view. This is basically an image I grabbed off Google Maps of a top-down view of my house. So I brought in and positioned it the same as the other image. So what I'm going to do, instead of trying to use the movement handles to make it easier, I know I just want to rotate 90 degrees around the x-axis. So I put it on the ground. Then I can come down. That's kind of bright, so you can do the same thing where I lower the brightness down. And then I'm going to change this to a scaling tool. So that's kind of how you could bring in a couple images. And let's say I wanted to select those grid lines, I could get rid of that. And then now I've got those two images. However many images you want to bring in, it's unlimited. You could have an image for every house on your street if you wanted. Let me go to the next slide. Okay, so this is the second option, how to use, or you can use a 3D house model. So instead of an image, more impressive look is achieved, if you can create a 3D model of your house and import it. Right now, we only support bringing in a .obj file format. That's a mesh type format, but most programs that you use in 3D have a way to export in that format. Sketchup can do it, Blender can do it. There's a lot of other programs that could be used to do that. So since a lot of people might use SketchUp, I created a slide to give some tips on how to use SketchUp for exporting your model. First, you create your 3D model in SketchUp, and I spent a lot of hours to do mine fairly detailed. So methods to export from SketchUp. There's a paid version that can support the OBJ format. I'm actually doing a kind of like a subscription thing. I didn't pay the $700. I think there was a version where you could pay like $129 a year. So I figure after 1 year, if I don't use it enough, I'll just cancel. I haven't used it, but people say there's some free plugins that you could install with the free versions of SketchUp and get the same feature. My dog is bugging me now. Yes, I also said you could design your house in the free version, and email it to someone else, and then they could export it for you. So that's the way Keith did his. He emailed me his file. I imported it up into the program and did a quick export in OBJ format and sent him the file back. This is over here. What does my mouse show up when I'm moving it?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just kind of showing, I don't know if the version you use, some people use a desktop version. This just shows you how I get to the export option on the web version that I use. And then I go down and select OBJ, and it brings up this dialog, and I'm showing you a screenshot of the settings that you should use. You have to swap the Y and Z coordinates because the way xLights has always been designed, it was a 2D program with Y is up, and we needed to keep the positioning the same. And a lot of 3D programs, they use that middle vertical axis as Z. So I guess this is a pretty common thing because SketchUp even provides the capability to swap those two axes if you're bringing it into another program that has the coordinates flipped, which we do. Triangulate all faces. I like that option. It just works better. That means if you have a square, it's going to break it up into two triangles instead of trying to use the more complex format of the thing that brings the face in. There's a way to say that the face is 4 points instead of triangles, but I just like to do it as triangulated. I like to export the edges. That'll mean like where your corners are on your walls. It'll show up as a nice little dark line. If you don't export the edge, then you're just going to get your, if you have the same color coming to a corner, sometimes it's hard to see the corner because we don't do like lighting and shading on the 3D models inside xLights. So I like to export the edges. And then exporting texture maps is going to be what brings in any of the textures you've placed. If you've placed colors, or if you've placed like a roof image on the roof like I did. Something that a lot of people run into, so I put a tip here because it bit me because I didn't know about it. If you import into xLights and a face is not showing its texture, one of the reasons could be that the face is reversed in SketchUp. So if you see any blue faces, they're not going to import properly because you don't really want to waste space and bring in all the, both sides of every face. I'm only bringing in one side, so you need to make sure the right side is facing outward. So to fix it, you just right click on the face, go down and choose reverse faces, and you'll see it change like from blue back to white. And then when you export, it'll be correct. Now, if you've already put a texture on it, you're not going to see that blue or white, but you'll know that it's you'll know like if that it's going to fix it if you saw it wrong inside xLights. What I did on mine, I had so many that were wrong. I went back into SketchUp and I just blew away all my textures on everything, fixed all these faces, and added my textures back in real quick. So now I'm going to show you how to bring it into xLights. I'll just go over this slide real quick and then demonstrate it. So to bring in the 3D object that you've exported from SketchUp, you're going to hit the same Add OBJ button that I used to add an image. And to make it, when you export it, you're probably going to end up with like the OBJ file and the material.mtl file might be in a folder with a subfolder containing your textures. For it to work right with the way we've coded it in xLights, you need to drop them all in the same folder. So this is what mine looks like. Christmas is my show folder. I just have a subfolder called house, and then I drop all the files in there that are needed for that 3D house model. And then when you select that OBJ file, everything's there and it finds it. So I just was mentioning here, you might need to reorganize what was exported from SketchUp. And I think now I'm ready to demonstrate that. So I'll say import a mesh. It's a little box right there with nothing. So I've got to go here and find my house object file. And now I brought it in. So I'll mention this since I see it. See, the colors aren't right on the walls. To fix that, I'm going to have to hit that diffuse colors checkbox. Now it's actually working opposite of the way I expected it to work. So I will warn you that might change because I think we need to fix it. Diffuse colors was meant to be the fake colors that you see right there. You know, it kind of takes the angle of the face and calculates a fake color just for models that had no coloring at all, so that you could see something instead of it being all black. It seems like we've somehow gotten that logic flipped. So I'm having to check it to see the face. So if we fix it and you see weird colors, you might have to go uncheck that box. To move this, you can see the handle to move it's hidden down here, so it's not easy to get to. So to fix that, I'm going to click Mesh Only. That way I've got my handle, and now I can move that guy around. So for like placing on the ground, you see how I'm looking, I see that line disappear. That way I know my line is right there on that ground plane. And if you want to play with the size, you could do it by typing in the numbers, or you can come in here and do it with these handles. And I'm going to be going over how to use this tool that I'm using right here to do that in a little more detail later. In fact, it's probably going to be on the next slide. Let's see, is there anything else I want to talk about with this? No, I'll just see if there are any questions I need to address while we're going. So I kind of went over what's on this slide a little bit, like all 3D objects, you'll be able to translate, scale, and rotate it. That's what I was just talking about, how you can use the axis handles, or you can type the values in manually. I just used the mesh only parameter and showed you how that worked. If you need to get to the axis handle to move the object. So let's see. So pretty much done with that section on how to bring the house in. I know I went through that kind of quick. So if anybody has any help, I think or needs any help, there's a lot of us that know how to do this and could help you out, or hit me up if you're on my friends list, or go to the xLights forum. I'm always monitoring that. So this is getting into the 3D interface and just how you are going to work in 3D. I've got the slide up on the right that I can see. It's probably going to be easier if I have xLights open as I talk through this. I assume we'll be able to provide these slides after the presentation if you wanted to go back and look at them.
This is fine.
Okay. Let me put my texture back. So rotating the view, let me turn my grid lines back on just because it's easier to see, and I want to get rid of that. So if you do to rotate the view, it's basically just clicking with the left mouse click and holding it down and rotating the view around. You can pretty much spin it around at any angle you want. I will say my philosophy, I did look at the way Blender works, and I've worked with a lot of 3D programs. I didn't try to exactly model any one of them. I took what I thought was good with those, and then one thing that I've never liked in most programs, even SketchUp, is I don't like him to jump over and click a bunch of buttons every time I want to change a mode. So I tried to make this so that most of the stuff you could do without flipping to like, oh, I'm now in the hand mode, now I'm in the orbit mode and all that, because I've never liked that, or right clicking to change the mode. So I tried to design it so that you could just do everything with the mouse and not have to jump to different modes. So let's see. Moving up and down, you're going around the x-axis, that way's around the y-axis. Zooming works the same. You scroll the mouse wheel. Panning is the same as in 2D. You click the mouse button down and grab it, and you can pan your view back and forth or up and down. The one thing I will mention that I added recently was there's a lot of people who were trying to like zoom in up there on a roof corner, and they were having trouble zooming into a certain spot. And that was because our pan used to only pan in the Z direction, because if you needed to get back here to an object that you placed further back in your yard, there was no way to get back there. So the default used to be it only panned in Z. Now what it does is more of a smart pan. So I look at the angle of the view, and if you're more than 45 degrees rotated this way, it's going to automatically switch so that panning is in the Z direction. And then if you're more of a front view, panning switches to the Y axis. So it's going to try to look at whatever angle you have your view, and then figure out what is the best, what would you probably want it to do when you pan. So that's another thing that I wanted to let you know about. Let me see what's on the next screen. Okay, now I'm going to go over that axis handle you've been seeing. I did kind of steal this straight from Blender. I kind of like the way their little axis tool worked, and I kind of copied the look of it. There's different handles for each feature. So the red one's going to be always your x-axis, green's going to be the y-axis, and z's the blue axis. So the one you see right here with the arrowheads, that's always going to be your translate tool. So you're only going to be able to translate across one axis at a time on most of these, except for the special tool I'll explain later. But you're going to grab that arrowhead, and then you can drag your object on that axis. The axis will actually highlight so you know which axis you're on. You switch between the tools by clicking the orange handle in the middle. I'm calling them handles. That's the only name I had for it. So you click that orange handle, and it's going to rotate between the available tools. So you click that once. Now you've got the scale tool. And then when you grab one of those little boxes on the end, it'll scale in that axis. And there's some what we call modifier keys like Control and Shift that are going to change what it does when you scale, and I'll go in more detail on another slide. The rotate tool is going to rotate around an axis, and then I'm mentioning that when you hover over any of these, they turn yellow, so you can know when you're going to grab it. The other thing I'll say is I couldn't capture it in a screenshot, but maybe it shows up in xLights. Let me just drop a model down. So the other thing is you see the mouse changes to a hand. That's helpful. If you're zoomed way out and you can't really see that thing, I can still sometimes look at that and I can see that switch to a hand. Now I'm going to make myself higher because now I'm in the middle there. So there I'm on the right. Now I know I can grab that and move it. So even when it's hard to see, that hand icon will show you that you're over top of it and then you can grab it. Or you just zoom in. Let's see, what else was I going to go over with this? Oh, I wanted to mention that I didn't have it in the presentation, but I don't know if I go over it later, but I'm going to talk about it right now with the rotate. I've been trying to work on fixing the rotate. It right now, what rotate does is it does X first, then Y, and then Z. So the only thing I don't like is, if you have a model like this down, and then you rotate, let's say you rotate the X-axis over 90, and you go to rotate around the Y-axis, it's not going to rotate around it's rotating around the Y-axis as if you haven't rotated an X yet because it's applying it second. I don't like that, and I want to change it, but it's actually not the easiest thing to do. So I actually spent like 5 days on it last week trying to get it right, and things just weren't working right. So I was hoping to have it done before this presentation. I just didn't finish yet. So just saying, hopefully that's going to be fixed and be coming down the road later. There's one more handle that you'll see that kind of looks like a cross. That was meant to represent that handle will move in X and Y at the same time. And we'll see that when I show you some of the models that actually use that handle. Let's see. Talked about some of this stuff. So, like I said, the handles turn yellow when you can grab them. Every model is going to have an orange handle that represents the center of the model. Not all of these tools will display for every model. Like the single line model doesn't have the scale tool because we just expect you to, if you need to make a line bigger, you're just going to grab one of the endpoints and move it. We don't really use the scale feature for that. I said certain models contain other blue or green handles that can be manipulated. That's like I said, the single line. It's going to have a start and an end handle that you're going to be able to grab and move. And then the arches, candy canes, and icicles are going to use the special XY axis handle when you need to move the third point in that model. So I'm going to talk about model types. And the reason I'm kind of talking about this as types is because all the models basically underneath the hood fall into 4 categories for the way they're coded, and why that might be useful. Excuse me. Why it might be useful to you is once you learn how models are placed and how they work, all those model types that are common are all going to work the same way. And so box models are basically, what that means is it's represented in either like a rectangular or a square space. Sometimes it's, like in the case of a matrix, it doesn't have much depth to it, but it's still represented as a square. So most of the models in xLights fall under the box model category. Our 2-point models, there's only 2 of them, a single line or a channel block, which is just another variation off of the single line model. Like I mentioned earlier, the one with the special handle, we have 3-point models, which are arches, candy canes, and icicles that have that third point. And then polypoint models are really only one type. That's the polyline right now. I'm mentioning that in that little orange note there that the default model placement is always on the ground or it's on the XY vertical plane. And what I tried to do was I tried to guess like what for each model type, where would you probably want to be placing this? You know, trees, you're probably always going to place them on the ground, so they default to starting on the ground plane. Whereas something like a star or spinner, you're probably putting those on walls, so they're going to typically draw on the XY vertical plane. So that's the only delta you might see between some of those box models is some of them will start at a different, you know, some of them will start on the ground plane and some of them will start on the XY vertical plane. And why that makes a difference is sometimes it helps to have your screen angled. Let me flip the xLights just. So if you know that something like the single line is always going to start on the ground plane. So when you create a single line, wherever you click, it's starting on that ground plane. So you really wouldn't want to have, oh, see, I lied. That one is showing the XY plane. So that one's on the ground plane. So the only reason I mentioned it is you wouldn't want to have your view looking like this when you're placing a tree, because the program's going to have a hard time figuring out where is your mouse intersecting the ground plane. You know, because if you have it right on the edge, I mean, it might still work. I'm not even going to try it because it could crash. And I'm thinking about, let me get some of this stuff back out of the way. So I'm just right clicking and deleting these guys. All right, what do I have on the next slide? Okay, I'm probably gonna need to just have xLights open and talk through this. So I'm gonna kind of go through some of the different model types and how you place them and some of the tricks for placing them. And just to make this run faster, I'm getting my house out of the way. I just want our view to see what I'm working with. Jump back to models. So basically the way it works for the tree and the sphere models is they're the only box models that really have any depth to them. So anything with depth to it is going to start on the ground plane. So wherever I click for placing a tree, it's always going to place them on the ground. When you click, you're basically clicking where you want the center point to be and then start dragging, and you can scale it as you drag up and down. And let's see, I'm also going over the scale tool a little bit here. So if you click that orange square and flip to the scale tool. So if you grab like the red handle and pull it, it'll scale in the X direction. Blue scales in the Z direction, green in the Y. Now there's some special things you can do. So if you're grabbing either X or Z, grab it first and start moving it, then hold down Shift, and it'll make X and Z equal so that you always have a nice uniform round tree if you wanted to change how wide it is. Holding down the Control key, that'll allow it to grow all three axes at the same time. It gets a little, sometimes I forget these myself, so I'll just like pick one, you know, hold down Shift. Oh, what's that doing? No, let me hold the other one and then flip between them. I'm going to jump over to this guy since he's already on the ground just to show this next thing. So if you are scaling, no, I didn't change the scale model. A scale tool. So if I hold down Shift while I'm on this Y-axis, see how the model stays stuck to the ground? So it kind of anchors the model to the ground and you can change its height. If I let go of Shift, then you see it's going to stretch it equally in both directions. So holding Shift is a modifier that says anchor to the ground and let me stretch the model up. Now, if you want to hold down Control and Shift, now you'll get X, Y, and Z will all scale equally, and it stays snapped to the ground. So there's a ton of variations on how they all work, and it's kind of hard to say exactly like, oh, the Shift always does this or Control always does that. I think it does kind of work that way as far as, Shift normally anchors things to the ground, and then Control is used to scale all three axes equally. But depending on whether it's like X or Z versus Y, I had to do a little, change in behavior on some of these. So some of it you just have to play with and kind of learn what kind of learn how you want to do it, or do like me and just start grabbing it and saying, oh, I don't like that. While you're moving it, just click the button and you can change what it's doing and it'll still stay snapped to the ground. Because if you start moving this, even though that's not on the ground right now, if you start moving and grab the button, it snaps it back to the ground for you. Now, if you were already like not on the ground, it's not going to bring it up to the ground, but wherever you started, it's going to stay there if you do that. So this guy should still be below ground. Yep. The only other tip I have for this is don't hold down the Shift key and then start trying to drag. It's not going to work. You've got to start your drag and then hold the modifier keys. Reason is because Shift is also used to do selection. So you kind of like tell the program you're trying to do selection if you press it first. So what's on my next slide? Okay, next slide's just going over some of the other models that fall into the square box model category. Let me get this stuff out of the way. So the other ones are like the matrix, the circle, custom models, DMX, image, spinner, star, window frames, and wreaths. So typically they're usually going to intersect the XY plane, which is kind of like the plane that you get when you start out bringing your stuff in 2D. So let me just pick one like a matrix. If I grab a matrix, it's going to start wherever I click, and then I drag for how big I want it to get the initial size. If you look, it's going to be in the middle there where depth is at the 0 location. So wherever I click, that's going to be the start point. So if you need it somewhere else, you're going to have to just start it there and then move it out somewhere else. So that's pretty much the only, I didn't have any other way to think of to let people place stuff somewhere else. So I just came up with this idea that I had to pick a plane that the mouse was going to intersect to do the initial placement, and then you could move it around. So when I'm working and doing my layout, a lot of times I'll just create something way off in the corner and then drag it everywhere I need it. So let me delete these guys. What else do I have on my slide? I guess I need one back so I can talk about that. So when you place these models, the translates, move the object around on any axis, and pretty much as you would think it would work. Rotate works. Typically, you usually rotate around the y-axis. It's not as normal to need to do the other rotations, but they do work. But like I said, if you rotate in that axis and then do a dual axis, it might not always look exactly the way you expect, especially if you start doing that one, it's going to swing wildly. Yeah, there's not going to be, as far as I know, there's no way to make the matrix look better in 3 dimensions. I might, if there is a way to do it, it'll probably take Dan helping figure that out, because I think the deal is when you're in 3D, I don't know if I don't think you see it unless you're actually trying to play back on it. But sometimes when you play back on Matrix and you're looking at an angle, it'll do some weird patterns where it looks almost like a moire pattern, and it kind of looks like there's some curved lines through it. You'll find that if you zoom into your matrix and look at it, it actually straightens out, and that's because things were meant to be drawn and looked at in 2D. We're drawing every single pixel, but when we start drawing all those pixels at an angle, and it's further away, they just don't seem to blend right. We're not like rendering a 2D image to the screen. We're rendering a whole bunch of little dots. So I currently don't know of a way to make that look any better. And that was in my presentation. I just glanced over and saw a question about the matrix while I was talking about it. Okay, let's see. Next is going to be the 2-point models, which is primarily the single line model. They're always going to start on the XY plane, like I showed earlier when I misspoke. Left click is going to place the start point, which will be the green square, and then you're going to drag it to place the, how big it is, where you're going to place your ending point, which is the blue square. Like I mentioned earlier, there's no scale tool for a line. What we do is if you rotate, we don't actually add rotation to the angle. Like, we don't store a rotation angle for a point. What we do is just recalculate the positions of those 2 points. Let me just drop one down so while I'm talking I can demonstrate it. So I'm going to click, drag, create that single line. Just shrink this down a little. So what normally does a translate is going to translate that point. So that's almost like rescaling it. Let's see. Yeah, so if you select either point and translate it, it's just going to move that point. But if you select the middle, then it translates the whole model. If you rotate, this will rotate the points around whichever handle you grab. So like if I grab this guy and rotate, it's going to rotate around. I reselect it, rotate around that handle. I know it wasn't too long ago, somebody suggested that the way the panning is kind of smart and knows where the angle is, that hey, if I put my view like this, I want to be able to draw my single line sideways, because you see it looks kind of crazy because it's putting that thing right there in my close to me on the screen, because it's trying to still use the same axis. So that's probably an upgrade that I thought was a good idea that I'll try to do. It shouldn't be too hard for me to figure out that you've rotated your view, and then I'll let you draw the line from along the z-axis. So probably look for that being a new feature that I'll try to do soon. I don't expect it would be very hard to add that. Let's see. I think that's everything for that slide. 3-point models. So that's your arches, candy canes, and icicles. So Arches and candy canes, they're typically placed on the ground. So when you grab an arch, you're going to click where you want to start on the ground and then drag over. Like always, we only create one arch when you draw, but you could come in and say that's 5 arches. Candy canes are going to place pretty much the same way. And icicles, since they typically are used like hanging off of a roof line, I have those start up on the vertical plane instead of the ground. All the other things work kind of like the 2-point model. So all your translation, your rotation, it's all going to work the same. These models have that third point I was telling you about earlier, where you can actually move in the XY plane to change the angle of your arches or your candy cane. If you're on icicles, it's going to change the angle your icicles are hanging. I don't know if I do mention it there in that little, there's a tip where I mentioned if you do want to tilt the model and you want rotation, it's best to do your tilting first, because the way things work in behind the scenes, it's going to be trying to do that tilt motion while it's rotated, and it might look like it's rotating across a funky angle, kind of the same way as our rotations are working right now. So I would recommend, if you need to, let me just do it right now. So if you need to tilt, I would do that tilt first, and then I would come here and do the rotation I wanted. If you grab that guy now, it'll still work, but it can feel, I think it feels a little different the way it rotates, because it's rotating, the way it rotates across the plane just is a little different. All right, let me see. Next slide, I have polyline, which is the last model type. Polylines are always going to default to the drawing on the vertical XY plane as well. So that's here. So wherever you click on the XY plane, it's going to start drawing a polyline. So you do a left click to place the first point, and then as you drag around, you're going to be on the XY plane. So if I end this, you can see I'm on the XY plane. So there's no depth to the model when you first create it. Don't really right now have a way to let you like draw them out here. Maybe when I figure out, how to draw the single line that way, maybe that's an enhancement I could do to this one, where while you're drawing, I still don't know. Problem is the way you rotate requires a left click, and that's also the action to place the point. So I have to think about that one. I don't know if there's a good way to allow you to rotate the view while you're creating this. So a lot of times you just have to create it and then come in and make the changes you want to make. Like you can click a point, translate that point to where you want it positioned. Let's see what I have in the presentation. And the left click to place the starting point. Basically, my note is that you click and then you release the mouse. Now I'm not holding any mouse buttons down. I'm just freely moving it. You click for each new point you want to add. And then one thing that's been a problem, some people didn't know how to end it. So hit the escape key, and that escapes you out of the creation of the model and finalizes it. Any point in the model can be translated. And then let me get rid of one of these guys. You can select the line segments. I can right click that and say define curve. Can't see it because the blue and the red are together, but if I hover over here, drag that guy, there's actually a red square. And I made it so if there's a red square, it usually grabs it first. And those are the control handles for creating your curve. And so you could grab these and you can make that into whatever kind of shape you want. You can get some pretty crazy things going on. And when you move the points, those control handles, they stay wherever they were. So if you needed it to go with it, they currently don't have any way to angle the control point with that corner point. Let's see. Pretty much all I had on that slide for polylines. Let's see what I was going to go over next. Okay, my next section is just how to do selections. So let me delete this guy. Let me get some trees. So if I select this twice, I should be able to just come down here and start clicking some trees in place. You know, I'm trying to remember. I don't know if I created. Well, I'm still creating that. That's why I always hate that option. I always forget it's selected and I start placing more. I don't know if I went over. I think I forgot to create a slide about the alignment tools. Like if you, well, let me talk about the selection first because you have to select to be able to do the alignment. I made it so that as you move the mouse around, it does a little highlight around the model as you hover over it. So then if you left click, then that selects it and becomes yellow, and then you get your handles that you can grab there, which looks like I had my view backwards. Once a model is selected, you can release the mouse button now, and then now I can pan my view around, or if I need to zoom in to get closer to one of these handles, I can do that, and that's going to stay selected. If I click on other models now, it doesn't matter. I made it so that I didn't want it to be hard to stay selected and keep selecting other things. So I made it so that it latches that selection, and to clear it, I didn't want to always have to use the keyboard. You can use the keyboard. You can hit escape. That'll undo any selection. The other thing is you can just go to somewhere where there's no model and double click. So if I want to switch what's selected, just double click, click something else, double click, click something else. So that was the quick mouse way I made to switch your selection, but I also wanted it to stay latched and not just be able to easily click something else, because once you get a lot of models close together, it's really easy to click the wrong one. And the next page, I'm going over multiple selections. So to do that, hold down the Shift key, click the mouse, left mouse click, and then start to drag. And you'll see the items will highlight as I drag the mouse around. I don't show that boundary box because it's more like a 3D volume. But I do show what's selected, and if you let go, everything you have will select. So if I hold Shift, I can select these four. I can let go of the mouse, pan it around here, and then I can hold Shift again and say, I want to add those two to my selection. Hold Shift again, and say I want to add that to my selection. Now that I've got those selected, I can move all those objects. So I made it so that you could add to that selection that way. Let's see. Yeah, you want to see, you can move to another area, Shift, I showed that. Once selected, grab the X there. Oh, rotation. Currently, there's no rotate option. Let me just double check with that tool. I don't think we'll even allow it. Click that. There's scale. There is rotate, but it only rotates the one model. Doesn't rotate the whole group. That's a feature I'm working on. That's what I spent several days on and ran into problems. So hopefully I'll get that feature working if you need to do group rotations. I think I've got some more selection stuff on the next slide. Yeah, so now I'm going over what it does when you, what you can do with the control key to modify your selection. So let's say I've selected these 6 guys here with the shift key. Now I've got my selection, no mouse buttons are pressed. I can kind of manage this group. If I want to just add something in without using like a shift drag, I can hold down the control key and go around and find the guy that I want, click him and add him to the group, or add him, click and add him. Or I've got this designed so it was a little tricky to get this to work the way I wanted, but I want you to be able to change who has focus. That's especially going to help once you start doing rotations. Translations don't really matter, but so second control click is going to change this, whichever guy you're clicking on, to be the guy who has focus. So I click on that guy. Now he's the one that has the handle. So whoever I control click gets focus. But if I click him again, he becomes deselected. So I kind of describe it as a tri-state. Using the control button, models are selected with focus, and then unselected. Selected again with focus, unselected. So they go through those 3 states when you use the control key to do your selections. Yeah, there's only one other thing. Once I have this selected and then I click to unselect, you can see I'm moving the mouse. I'm clicking. See, I just messed up my whole selection and deselected. You got to move off of the model and back on to get that box to highlight to reselect them. That's in the presentation, which hopefully we're gonna share that with you after we're done. So if you want to go back and look at these slides and see what I have written up, I tried to talk through it so that you could visually see it instead of me just reading words the whole time. Okay, I think that's everything with selections. Let me just look ahead and see what I've got. Yeah, I have camera viewpoints. So I'm going to jump back to xLights because I forgot to do a slide on alignment. And that was something I wanted to do. So I just deleted all those. So let's say I wanted to pop down just 5 trees across here. I could select all of those, right click and say align the front edge. Now they're all perfectly aligned in that direction. They all started on the ground, so that edge was already okay. It would probably be easier to see the benefit of this. Let's say I created some different size trees here, and they're all spaced out. Could select all of those. You can right click and I can say I want to align horizontal centers. I don't know if those would say align front or align back. And that aligned all the fronts. There's resize, match size. So now all of them are the same size. And that's where the one that's the one that has focus becomes important, because I believe we've done things right. Add these in with the control key. So if he's now focused and I say resize, match size. Now they all become his size. So that's where it's important on who has focus, because if you do alignments or if you do resizing, it's going to use whichever one that you've control clicked to have focus to be the one that looks at to figure out which edge you actually want to align. Currently, no, I don't have any way to align on a curve. Let's see. Other things, so you can align tops, bottoms, lefts, rights, front to back. Oh, let me, if you ended up for some reason with a bunch of models that were all spaced out and different. Let me just select all those. I can right click and say align those with the ground. Now it snaps them all back to the ground. Line their backs. Now they're all in a perfectly straight line. I can say distribute horizontally, and now they're all perfectly spaced. So with those tools, you can quickly drop down, models like that and get them aligned and distributed, pretty quickly. So that was a slide I forgot to do. So next is camera viewpoints. So camera viewpoints, that was one of the the goals of going 3D was so that you could quickly jump between different viewpoints in your display. So to do that, to save one, right click, hit save current viewpoint. I'll call this front view. I can rotate my view, maybe zoom out a little. Let's say I want to create another one and call this side view. So now you can right click and say load front view, and now you're back to that view, or you can say load side view. So you can quickly jump back to any of those views you've created. I'm not going to delete one, but if you need to, you could delete one of those using the menu. And let's see what I have on the next slide. Viewpoints with the house preview. So I have to create a sequence to show this. And I've got no house right now. Let's see if I'm going to have to reset. Yep, if you don't have your house, usually just do dock all. That doesn't work, do reset to defaults. So good, this is kind of what I want. This is what you might see at first, and it's still showing 2D. So what you need to do is right click, switch it to 3D, and now you've got your 3D view. So even when you're working in 3D, you still have the option to come back and show your house in 2D or 3D. You'll also have right here, you'll have any additional views that you've created, not viewpoints. So it gets confusing. There's a lot of things that sound the same. If you created views and layout like Halloween and Christmas, those show up here. But viewpoints are these new 3D camera viewpoints. So from this view now, I can say side view. I can say front view. So now your house preview inherits those same different view angles that you've created. And the next slide, I think I'm talking about how you would use that for rendering. So let's see. Probably would work good if I create a quick little grid like I did in the slides there. So, I forgot. Shift doesn't do the same thing in house preview. So let me create a little grid like I have there. 3, 4. It doesn't have to be perfect. I basically trying to do this just so it creates a good area. All right, and then I'm going to demonstrate this. The top view works pretty good, so I'm going to put it here. Tell this it's a top view. Let's go back over here. Now I should be able to load top view. Oh, to demonstrate this, I'm going to need a group. So I don't have a group yet. I'm going to say, just call this trees. And then I'm going to toss all those trees into this group. I'm not going to save it. I should be able to go back over here. Grab that group and throw it on there. So now I can drop a butterfly effect down on my group. So if you look, each one of those trees is getting the butterfly effect individually. So it's not like based on the camera angle. So if you wanted to change and render from a different camera angle, like let me put this on that top view so it's the right angle. And then where's my render styles right here? If I change it to per preview, I don't know how easy you can see that, so let me drag it over here. So if I change the render style to per preview, now we populate the camera angles you've created. So if I pick top view, now you can see that butterfly is rendering from as if, it's now my render buffer. It's looking down. So if I grab and change my angle, now you can see it, it looks different. So I just completely changed the look of that effect just by coming in here and changing, which camera angle is rendering the effect. So as you know, these render styles, they're on a per effect basis. So every effect you put down could be different. I could drop another butterfly down here, have that guy be a top view. I can have another butterfly effect that is a front view. So I can click and that butterfly is doing that one's doing that, and then that one's doing that, and they're all three different. So let's say I'm on this guy who is the top view. He's gonna look best if I look at it from the top view, and that's gonna look like you're seeing it. Let me just switch it to bars just to show what that does. So you see the bars are going top to bottom. This one, we switch to per preview, top view. Now you can see the bars are moving up, up across your yard as if it was going from the front of your yard to the back of your yard, because it's doing it based on this angle now. So from the front of your yard, it's going to look like this. Whereas if you were back on the default, it's going to look like that. So it's kind of cool. It gives you a lot more options to change what the effects do and how they're going to look from different angles. Sometimes, you don't really even need the viewer to be at a different angle, but you can just do it to get a different look. So add some variation to it. We're still rendering 2 dimensions right now. We haven't gone to the point of actually giving you the option to do 3D as far as the rendering buffer. But it does, it does add some different flavor to your sequencing. And I think that's pretty much all I had to go over. that I had planned.
Well, thank you, Gil, very much. I appreciate the presentation. I'm sure everybody else learned quite a lot. It was pretty comprehensive, and I appreciate it.
The xLights project exists because of people like you. Help continue the project by making a donation today at xlights.org/donate.